We've sent every indication that we want this economic relationship to work. We think it has created a tremendous amount of prosperity. But just think, if we'd done this 11 and a half months ago, we would have removed a lot of uncertainty. They have kind of chilled the relationship. You had both political parties being anti-American. Well, that stuff's not very constructive. So
Mark Carney has also announced a strategic partnership with Communist China.
There's only two countries that have done an elbows-up approach. If Canadians see their future with China, I don't think it's a bright move.
Could you explain what are the main irritants apart from the alcohol ban? President Trump said last week that he wasn't interested in renewing CUSMA. Doesn't that come off as like a bit counterproductive?
He and the trade team are quite frustrated. We're not going to wait for Canada to respond. And eventually the money will run out. If the money all runs out, we don't have any deals with Canada, that's so be it. I don't know, you say so many questions and then you go well beyond that. I don't know. But,
journalism and commentary 1 year anniversary.
I don't believe journalism being funded by the government is the solution.
Rebuild the foundation. You have to retell the story.
Market conservative
Other news that actually matters.
I hence wanted to ask. I think they should answer their questions, especially if they're politically charged.
Hello, I'm Elie Cantin-Nantel, and welcome back to my podcast. Today we have an exclusive interview with the Ambassador of the United States, Pete Hoekstra. And this interview comes at a critical time for Canada and the US as we approach the July 1st deadline for CUSMA, the Canada, Mexico, and America Free Trade Agreement. Ambassador Hoekstra and I had a wide-ranging conversation that is a must-watch. So without further ado, let's get to it. But first, be sure you are subscribed, hype and like the video, hit the notification bell, and consider getting a paid channel membership for less than $5 a month, because I'm one of the only journalists left in this country that refuses to take subsidies from the federal government. And now, here is our interview with Ambassador Hoekstra. Ambassador Hoekstra, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
I think it'll be a good experience. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So we're talking on June the 15th. We're 15 days away from the deadline for the renewal of USMCA. And so far, we have a Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and he was elected in part because he had promised that he would be the one that was the best to get along with the Americans. And yet, we don't have a deal 15 days from the deadline to renew. And while Mexico has made some advances and some progress with formal negotiations, Canada has not. Now, they have formally requested the renewal of CUSMA, but they have not engaged with the United States the way that Mexico has. So my question to you is, what do you make of all of this, the situation we're in right now, and why do you think Mexico has made more progress? And more importantly, should Canadians be concerned?
Okay, those are your first three questions. You said you were going to have 12, so there's three. What do I make of all of this? 11 and a half months potentially of lost opportunity. I think we have the potential between the United States and Canada to have an awesome agreement. We had the framework of that back in October. Aluminum, steel, auto parts, oil, and uranium. That's a pretty good agreement. And those are all areas where we work together and have been working together extensively. Uranium might be a new field because up until the recent move where everybody wants to go to nuclear, nuclear was kind of a dying industry. So at least four of those are where we've had strong relationships. And I think many people see that these are existing industries where we can grow and expand those to be even bigger. We then we still have the opportunity to talk about, reinvigorating old industries. I was at PDAC, which is the acronym for the big mining conference that takes place in Toronto, and they said it might have been the biggest ever. Who would have thought, right, that in 2026 you would have the largest turnout ever for a mining conference? That was a dying industry. And all of a sudden, there's a tremendous amount of industry or interest in bringing that industry back. Same with shipbuilding, right? We need icebreakers, so we sign a deal. In this case, we successfully negotiated an agreement between Canada, Finland, and the United States to strengthen Canadian-U.S. Ability to build icebreakers. And then you got all the potential for new industries, AI, nuclear, small modular reactors, data centers. You just go critical minerals, rare earth. You go down the list and say, wow, look at this is all potential. And I think we could have locked a lot of that down earlier, but we haven't. We still have 15 days to kind of like when we've got to make a formal report to Congress and those types of things about progress. The good thing that keeps me optimistic, we could get this done in a morning at 30,000 feet. Get it done in the morning, go have a donut, cup of coffee at Tim Hortons, and go have lunch. At 30,000 feet, the framework is there to get a great deal. But just think if we'd done this 11 and a half months ago, we would have removed a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Well, so Prime Minister Carney, in light of the tariffs, in light of the actions by the Trump administration, he has said the following, and a few quotes for you.
That decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship between Canada and the United States is over.
We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition.
The days of our military sending 70 cents of every dollars to the United States are over.
Mark Carney has also announced a strategic partnership with Communist China, and he removed the tariffs off of the Chinese EVs, which is a break from the U.S. and its policy. Donald Trump has always opposed the Chinese EVs. In light of this rhetoric and these actions, what do you think they have had or they're having on the Canada-U.S. relationship?
Well, they've China killed. They have kind of chilled the relationship, but we were very encouraged by the speech that he gave in New York 2.5 weeks ago, where the message was, Canada, and I don't have the exact words, but it was more along the lines of Canada can help make America great again.
Right, yes.
And it's like, yes, okay, we like that message. We were at the Eurasia conference last week, and Dominic LeBlanc spoke there. Mark Wiseman, your ambassador to the U.S., was there. Solomon was there, one of your ministers. And they all gave very, very pro-America Canada economic relationship talks. And it's like, wow, this is awesome, because much of the last year has been captured in the terms of rupture. You've got provinces that have said, they don't say we're not going to buy American alcohol. They're saying we're not even going to give Canadians the opportunity to buy American alcohol. There's 11 out of 13 provinces that say that. There are, I believe it's 11 out of 13 provinces that have made it very, very difficult, if not impossible, for American companies to even bid on provincial contracts. You have a number of your premiers have said, don't travel to America. Well, that stuff's not very constructive. So hopefully this is kind of a new tone and a new tenor as we, close out through these last 15 days. I don't expect fireworks on July 1, but, I think, by the end of July, August 1, we'll have a much clearer understanding of where this economic relationship is going. I mean, we've sent every indication that we want this economic relationship to work. We think it has created a tremendous amount of prosperity, wealth, and jobs on both sides of the border. We think that can continue, but at the same time, we recognize that if Canada wants to move into a different direction because they believe this relationship is ruptured, they are free to do that. I think, exactly why Canadian government made the decision on electric vehicles and those types of things, to come into Canada. That's for your government to explain, not for us to try to analyze. I do believe at the end of the day, and I spent a lot of time, I chaired our House Intelligence Subcommittee And I don't believe that the path forward for Canada is going to include really, really close integration with China. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to point to any part of the world and say, now, there, look at this country. They've had an awesome relationship with China, and it has really, really benefited them. You can't. There's not a long list of examples that I'm aware of. I am aware of, having served in Europe, you've got a bunch of countries in Europe, the EU, who embraced China. Said, "Oh man, what an awesome opportunity! We get access to that market." And then after a decade or after 15 years, it's kind of like they look around and say, "Ooh, this hasn't worked out well for us, but it's worked out great." Worked out great for China. And I think that's kind of the pattern that you see around the world. And you've got very smart political and business leaders. I don't believe that you're going to fall into that same trap.
You touched on the alcohol ban. The first premier to put that into force was Doug Ford. The media in Canada likes to call Doug Ford Captain Canada because Premier Doug Ford has kind of taken on a role of spokesperson, alas, unofficial for Canada. And he goes on CNN and the other American media channels. He's gone down to DC. But he's also had a very combative rhetoric style. And a few of his quotes or actions, he's run an anti-tariff ad in the US featuring Ronald Reagan. He said,
he needs to pay the price in the midterms. If I got to go down there and knock on the doors myself, I will.
He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada.
Now, he and his supporters, they'll say, well, we're doing this as a way to try to get the U.S. to back down from tariffs. And this is kind of our pressure point. In the broader context of Canada trying to get a deal with the U.S., do you think that this sort of conduct or the actions from the Ontario Premier, do you think they've been useful, or do you think they've maybe been more of a nuisance?
Well, I think I saw Doug last week.
Yeah.
On Wednesday night, we had a very, very friendly conversation.
He's very friendly, like I've met him before.
Very friendly, very outgoing. We were supposed to meet on the fringes of the Eurasia Conference. For some reason, that meeting got canceled. And he said, I have no idea why that meeting was canceled. Pete, let's get together. Mm-hmm. So I hope that we can get together in the next week to 10 days to have some discussions. He was just in Washington for 36 hours. It was a very, very positive message. It was nothing about, coming down and campaigning against the president. It was nothing about banning America or making America pay a price. Although when I saw him on Wednesday night, the tariffs are going to stay, or the alcohol ban's going to stay in place. It's kind of like, okay. I mean, you've made that clear for the last 15 months. That's how long American products have been banned in Ontario. And it's kind of like, from my perspective, no, it's not helpful, okay? And in some ways, it's kind of defined the negotiating status. I mean, there's been discussions about what kind of proposals have come back and forth, or what kind of proposals have been made to the U.S. I can tell you, any proposal that comes from Canada that goes to the U.S. that doesn't have on top of it put American alcohol back on the shelves across Canada, we don't even look at the rest of it, because it's kind of like, no, that we don't do anything like that to Canada. Matter of fact, your political leaders, when they go to the U.S., they say, Americans love us.
Yes, and I mean, I experienced this myself. I went to the Charlie Kirk Conference, America Fest, in December as a Canadian. And there's been some narratives in media here that MAGA hates Canadians, and I didn't know what to expect. The most lovely.
You don't know what to expect.
And meanwhile, in my Twitter replies, I had like prominent liberals being like, "We hope you get abducted by ICE." Like, that is the lovely, polite Canadian.
They go there,
shocking,
and it's
to be honest.
Doug, they love us, and it's that's
they
because
do.
Our politicians are not going out, our business leaders are not going out and saying, don't buy Canadian, don't travel there. It's kind of like, no, let's negotiate a business deal. Let's create prosperity and wealth and jobs on both sides of the border. That's what governments are focused on and should should be focused on. And so, that other stuff is, it's in the U.S., it's noise. I can see that it's more than noise here in Canada. I mean, I'm sorry. We do take notice of when we watch the opening of the World Cup in Toronto and Canadians boo the American flag. Really? 85% of your trade from the U.S. and across the border still comes across the border tariff-free. You have the second best trading relationship with anybody in the world of any country that the United States has trade relationships with. We have $2.5 billion of commerce going across the border each and every day. We are fighting on fentanyl, on crime, and all of these kinds of things. Very sadly, it was a week ago that a Toronto police officer lost his life, going after some criminals, some serious folks that may have had something to do with the attack or, the shooting at the U.S. consulate. That's the kind of partnership that we have in law enforcement and military and these kinds of things. And you're going to boo the American flag? I think when the sound system and the singer lost her mic in Buffalo, and the Canadians were playing the Buffalo Sabres or whatever, Americans started singing.
Yes, I remember that.
They started singing the Canadian anthem. Okay, that's how Americans feel about Canada. And yes, it hurts to see that there are some Canadians that don't reciprocate. The good thing is there are a tremendous amount of Canadians, I believe, that still have a fondness for America. But I may be wrong. I hope I'm not. But I think there's a lot of fondness by a lot of Canadians for Americans. But so yeah.
Well, you talked a bit about anti-Americanism, so I'm going to ask you my question about anti-Americanism
Okay,
now.
I think this is question number 8. You have 4 left.
There are a lot of sub-questions in between the questions.
Yeah.
So just for the audience who not be aware, whenever we do an interview, we always ask the guests how much time they have, and then I always tell them how many questions I have so that we can try to fit all of them. And I told the ambassador that I had 12 questions, but a lot of them include kind of a couple different questions. So he's learning my interviewing style today. So there's a man named...
Congratulations, too. I mean, recent college graduate last week, right?
Yes.
That is awesome. And now you've got your own little business and maybe big business and podcast, and that's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir. It means a lot coming from you. So George Grant, he's a famous Canadian professor, philosopher, and writer. And back in 1973, he said the following. He said, Canada originally was put together by 2 groups of people that didn't have much in common, but they did not want to be American. And Justin Trudeau, in his last days as Prime Minister, was in Washington, and he went on CNN, and he said this 50 years after George Grant.
Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American.
And according to an ECO survey, favorability towards the United States and Canada has fallen to 20%, and there are more Canadians who view the U.S. unfavorably compared to communist China. Now, compared to the Americans, we were just talking about how Americans love Canadians, and that's true. 74% of Americans view Canada positively. What do you make of this?
That I remember for 8.5 months, maybe longer, you had both political parties being anti-American.
Mm-hmm.
Elbows up, and the other party responding, me too. Right? So it's kind of like, okay, so you got both political parties. It's been a phenomenally successful political movement of, let's make America the bad guy. And, so you had both political parties. We have lots of friends.
Right.
Okay. If you're in the business community and you do business with America, you like America. It's been good to you. You've been good to us. It's been a mutually beneficial relationship. So the business community, it's kind of like, we really, we want this to continue. We want it. We see a lot of potential. We probably see more potential in growing our business with the United States than any part of the world. You have smart business people, okay? It's not like they haven't thought about, like, diversification is like, wow, that is an awesome idea. We never thought of that. You've got smart business people, and they've tried to go to Europe, and what they'll tell me is, Pete, getting into Europe is really, really hard. It's kind of a closed economy. Getting into Asia is really, really tough because the economics are so different. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, the best diversification for us is, and Canadian businesses have been very good at diversification. Instead of selling to 5 states, they now sell to 12. All right? As our auto industry has gone to Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, Indiana, moved away from Ohio and Michigan, and just gone to different places. Canadian businesses have gone there as well. Okay, so they've diversified. They're very, very smart business people. But if Canadians see their future with China, that's their business. Okay, that I don't think it's a bright move, but if that's where they want to go, head over there, man. Take down your defenses. What are you talking about defending the Arctic for? If China's your best friend, you really don't have to.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask, going back on USMCA CUSMA, you said in one of your previous answers that you guys are looking to make a great deal. But President Trump said last week that he wasn't interested in renewing CUSMA.
Well, I'm not looking to renew it. I don't, I made the deal. And the primary reason I made the deal is that NAFTA was the worst trade deal I've ever seen. Yeah. I don't know that I'm going to renew it because, to be honest with you, the United States does much better. Hey, we don't need anything that Canada has. We don't need anything that Mexico has, but they need everything that we have. And they have to treat us better. With Mexico and Canada, we have trade deficits. We should have surpluses with them. We don't need their cars. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We don't need anything.
Now, you then said in Toronto that, well, we should take that as an opportunity to put something forward. But isn't that sort of rhetoric from the president saying, I'm not looking to renew the trade deal while the U.S. is actively negotiating or trying to negotiate to make a trade deal? Doesn't that come off as like a bit counterproductive, you think? Or
far be it from me to critique the president's negotiating style. The guy's a billionaire. He's president of the United States. He does some things pretty well. Mm-hmm. And negotiations is one of them. And I think, right now, he and the trade team are quite frustrated with, there's only 2 countries, okay, that have done an elbows up approach to us for a year. Canada and
China.
Yes. Okay. And, but we've negotiated, I think, with 50% of the world's GDP, we've got trade agreements with them. We've signed, I think, some kind of memorandum of understanding on critical minerals with 17 countries out of a summit that Secretary Rubio had at the State Department a few months ago. One of the countries that was invited to that meeting was Canada. They didn't sign it. That's okay. We invited them. We put our case forward as to why, partnering and, kind of having a shared objective moving forth on critical minerals, rare earth, and all of that. 17 countries said, that's a pretty good case. We're signing up.
Right.
Put my name down. Canada didn't. Okay? That's okay. What I can tell you is, like when we were at PDAC, again, the mining conference, we had the White House representative. We had the Energy Department represented. We had the Department of War represented. We had Interior. We had Exim Bank. So they were all there. And, they held a symposium. And, why? So we were up here. And it wasn't just Canadian. There were mining companies from around the world. It's a world conference. But, we were up there making our case why partnering with the U.S. would be a good deal on rare earth minerals and those types of things. And so we're there, we're making the case. So we're going to fix it. We think Canada can make a compelling case as to why they would be our best partner on rare earth minerals, critical minerals, and those types of things. We've already invested in Canada. Okay, it's not new on these types of projects. So we think Canada is an ideal partner. You're close. We think we have this. I know we have the same philosophical view on so many different things. And we're going to fix this. So I think it's the Department of Defense, the Department of War, has like $250 billion available to invest around the world for us to get the critical minerals that we need. And yeah, we're trying to pitch Canada. What projects do you have? You want to partner with the U.S.? And, if Canada responds, we'll love to work on a deal with Canada. But at the same time, we're not going to wait for Canada to respond. For Canada to come back and say, yeah, we want to partner with the U.S. Who knows? I mean, they're trying to make deals in Europe and other parts of the world. It's kind of like, that's okay. If you want to make a deal with Europe and there's not room for the United States, that's okay. But we're not going to wait for you to come up with an answer. All right? You don't get right of first refusal. So we're making deals with people around the world, and this $250 billion is, slowly. We're making commitments to other people. And eventually the money will run out. And if the money all runs out, we don't have any deals with Canada, so be it. But it's not like, okay, we're reserving $50 billion for Canada. So we got a fund of 200 the rest of the world and $50 billion for Canada. So we got 250. We got to fix our critical mineral supply. And we've dedicated this money to it. And as we solve our problem and that money goes down, when the money's gone, the money's gone. It's fairly straightforward, not that complicated.
I wanted to ask you about the trade irritants that the U.S. has with Canada. I know alcohol is one of them, but we don't often hear about the trade irritants in our media. In fact, I had to look them up today preparing for this interview, and I'm a news junkie. They don't come up often. I think a lot of Canadians don't even know that the U.S. has some irritants with Canada. They think this is all just Trump being, mean and wanting to impose tariffs for no good reason, because that has been a narrative that has gone around. So could you explain what are the main irritants apart from the alcohol ban?
Well, I mean, the digital services tax was one. I was in the room when the president said, that's a problem. And the response was, well, we're doing it. We're putting it in place on Friday. And the president said, that's a problem. It was put in place, and not too long after that, it was removed. Online streaming is a problem in terms of controlling content and those types of things. And it really became a bigger problem when it was not a 15, you went from a 5% tax to a 15% tax, not on earnings of these companies in Canada, on revenue. So companies could perhaps not be making money on Canada, but they'd have to be paying 15% of their revenue to not even it's a quasi-government entity that would then take the money and distribute it to people who might be competing against our streaming folks. That is one. We've got issues with drug pricing. We've got issues with other controls on our data companies and those kinds of things. And there was a at one time I think there was a list of 30-some irritants that we had with Canada, because what happened, I voted on NAFTA way back in 1993. Once people started talking about free trade, okay, NAFTA wasn't free trade. That has become such a misnomer, because to me, free trade is quite simple. You've got Okay, your tariffs are zero. Our tariffs are zero. That's free trade.
Yes.
Okay, and I told my constituents back in '93, I'll read NAFTA before I vote on it. And then I got it. The book, 1,000. I don't know if it was 1,000, but it was a thick book, 1,000 pages. That's not free trade. And you flip through it, and what is it? It's page after page after page after page after page of negotiated tariffs. Here's our free trade agreement, and this is what we're tariffing asparagus on. This is what we're tariffing, peaches on, apples, pears, and I grew all of those things, or people grew all of those things in my congressional district. So you look at them, and the other thing that has happened since the notion of free trade, and that's what these irritants are. People have put in, countries have gone. And you can look this on the internet, so it must be true. What countries have done is, free trade agreements have gone up. The other thing that's gone up is non-tariff barriers, things that governments put in place that make it more difficult for you to sell. So the tariffs are lower. But they've put in all kinds of things for that just make trade difficult. Europe has grown especially good at that, and most of the irritants that we see with Canada are these non-tariff trade barriers that have been put in place at the federal government level or have been put in place at the provincial level.
I want to shift for the remaining time that we have left to the issue of religious freedom, religious persecution. This is something I know the U.S. government has always championed, and that the president has been a very strong defender of religious freedoms for Christians and Jews around the world in particular. You're the ambassador to Canada. In Canada, we have seen since May 2021, 132 churches have been burned down or vandalized. We've seen a recorded increase in the anti-Christian bigotry, and we've also seen since October 7th, a very concerning rise in anti-Semitism. Just some statistics, 178% increase in police-reported hate crimes targeting Jewish people between 2020 and 2024. And Jews in Canada, they make around 0.9% of the population, but are the target of 70% of religiously motivated hate in this country. I was wondering if there's anything you'd like to say or comment regarding this.
Well, number one, thank you for bringing it up. It is it's a serious issue. We have some of the same, trends developing to a lesser extent in the United States, but we're very, very concerned about them. So thanks for bringing it up. It's why I love alternative media, because these are things that you won't see covered in mainstream media. Okay, they won't talk about this stuff. But we do everything that we can to stand alongside our friends in the Christian community, but also, especially importantly, our friends in the Jewish community. The first ambassador invited to come to the residence and meet with me when we took our posting in Israel was the Israeli ambassador. We want to just send a message to the Israeli ambassador, the Jewish people. There's no space between us and you. We will defend your right as much as we can in a foreign country. I mean, that's not our decision, but we can express our views on this and say, we're with you. And it's religious freedom for everybody.
Yes.
Okay? It's not one, it's not a narrow group of religion. Well, we're going to support your religious freedom, but forget everybody else. That's not where we are. It's embedded into the American DNA that religious freedom of speech are absolutely essential to who we are, and we will stand for those values wherever there's a U.S. embassy.
Ambassador, my last question.
That's
I wanted
13.
to ask...
I think you're done.
My goodness, I'm being held to account. That's my
Yes.
job, sir. I'm the one who's supposed to hold you accountable. I wanted to close with something a bit more personal. You've now been the ambassador for a year. How has that experience been? I know you were previously an ambassador in the Netherlands, but this is your first time being ambassador to Canada. How has the experience been? And what have you learned about Canada and Canadians that maybe you didn't know about before?
By and large, it's been a great experience. Okay. I mean, we have great relationships with into your business community. Anybody who touches defense recognizes the partnership that we have formed over the years. Canadians liberated my parents in the Netherlands and those types of things. They recognize, from according to the words of your prime minister, that since the collapse of the Berlin Wall 37 years ago, this year is the first year that Canada has stepped up to start meeting its defense commitments, its military commitments.
Yes.
Okay. You think about it. That's a pretty striking statement. For 37 years, somebody's been carrying the water in terms of protecting Canada. And I think I know who that country is. And I don't necessarily, but I will go back to it. Okay? With that kind of a record, you're going to boo the flag that for 37 years, has provided the backstop to Canadian security and safety. And I know you were with us in Afghanistan, and you've made other sacrifices, and we appreciate those each and every day. But for the consistent pattern of 37 years, it was American taxpayers, okay, that willingly, because they love Canada, that willingly paid for us to backstop Canada, okay? It was the distillers in Kentucky that make the bourbon and the whiskey. They paid those taxes for 37 years that you now ban from being sold in Canada. Think about it. Really? Is that who you are? Is that what you want to be? That's not the Canadians that I know. So really, you're going to, when somebody says you don't travel to the United States, that's right. We shouldn't travel to the United States because only 85% of our stuff going back and forth across the border is tariff-free. We're not going to go because we only have the second best deal of anybody in the world in trade with America. I don't, so those are some of the unfortunate things. But, like I said, we've met lots of great people. We're disappointed every once in a while. Canadians are disappointed in us every once in a while. Understand that, okay? But the bottom line is it hasn't shaped our framing of who we believe Canada is. And I hope, I hope for the people that I have met, they don't represent the kind of proportion that you're talking about. These are not people who believe that China is a better partner moving into the future than the U.S. is. But I may be wrong. That's possible. I hope not.
Well, Ambassador Hoekstra, that's all the time we had, but we'll have to have a follow-up conversation to talk a bit more about defense.
I don't know. You say so many questions and then you go well beyond that. I don't know. But hey, thank you.
My pleasure.
I wish you the best in your career. And
this concludes our interview with Ambassador Hoekstra. I want to know what you think, so put your thoughts in the comments below. And be sure to like the video, hype the video, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And consider getting a paid channel membership for less than $5 a month. Until next time, God bless.